Welcome to Unscripted with Russo. For our podcast, we decided to explore the people behind the narratives. I'll introduce decision makers and influencers and find out the intimate story behind their rise to success. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unscripted with Russo, Season 5. I'm your host, Ashley Russo. I'm very excited for my guest that's with us today. Mimi Griffin is the president and CEO of MSG Promotions. Mimi, welcome to the podcast.
Ashley, thank you so much for having me.
So I like to say, now you have your own promotion company, but to us, you're sort of the golf USGA lady of the Lehigh Valley. Is that how you find yourself commonly known?
Most of my work is done outside the Lehigh Valley. It's only when we host events at Saucon that I really concentrate my efforts in the Lehigh Valley. So yes, my reputation is well earned, mainly because people know me as running the major events here at Saucon.
But also because you're a bit of a hometown girl. I mean, for us, we sort of think you grew up not too far away from here in Lancaster. Is that correct?
Very good. Yes. Lancaster is where actually I was born and lived in Philadelphia until I was about 7. And then my parents relocated and spent most of my youth in Lancaster.
So tell us a little bit about your upbringing, your childhood. What kind of family were you from? How many kids? Where did you fall? And what kind of kid were you?
Very competitive family. What was funny is I came from 3 generations of female basketball players. My grandmother played, my mother played, and my sisters and I played. My father did not play basketball. Neither of my brothers played basketball. My mother would scream at the TV during Big 5 games as I was growing up. So I grew up honestly learning how to be passionate about the sport of basketball from my mother, which was really interesting. So I'm very much into the history of women's basketball as well.
How interesting to be in a family where all the women played basketball. Was it something that you were encouraged to do and that you did sort of as a hobby together? And it's kind of funny. Did the guys come cheer you on?
Yes, they did come cheer us on. Again, we came by it pretty naturally. My mother was 6 feet tall in the 1940s. And so she played in the Philadelphia Catholic League, which at the time was the pinnacle of women's or girls basketball, and was very famous in Philadelphia. So she grew up playing all her life, and it was just something that the females in the family just naturally gravitated to because my mother was so into it and so well versed. It was nothing that was ever expected, but it was something that was revered. And so we kind of found our way and found our identity through basketball.
Were you into school? Were you not into school? If you were, what were your favorite subjects? And did you have any other hobbies? You played basketball, but what about anything else? Music or chorus or anything like that?
Yeah, well, if you heard me sing, you'd understand chorus was not it. I was growing up in the early 70s in high school, late 60s in grade school, and basketball, it really was my identity, and it was what I was good at it. And as a result, I gravitated to it because I felt good about it, and I felt good about myself through basketball. So I was the kind of person that loved practice, which how weird is that? And I was also the kind of person that loved school. I loved classes. I loved studying. I was pretty nerdy early on.
You liked achieving. So it sounds like you liked the idea that you were achieving something, reaching a goal. I can certainly relate to that concept.
Yeah, you know what it was, Ash? It was one of those things where when you do well at something, you naturally are drawn to it because you feel better about yourself and about your prospects. And so as a result, I did well in school, but it was work. It was hard work. And I wasn't naturally gifted. My sister was naturally gifted in school. And so she was 4 years older than I was and really paved the way for me and laid the foundation for me to understand what was possible. And so that was an incredible benefit to me. But it was a lot harder for me to achieve what she achieved because I wasn't as gifted as she was. On the basketball side, she worked really hard at basketball and was very, very good. I was more naturally gifted as an athlete on the basketball side. I still worked real hard, but it was an interesting position for both of us because I always viewed her as my idol because she did things that I wanted to do because I saw, again, how she grew and blossomed and felt about her ability to achieve in certain areas. And so that's what I pursued as well.
nice to have that give and take of where you could motivate one another through those times and through the years. What were some of the lessons that you've taken away from your time playing basketball and working hard at something and being committed to something that maybe used in your early career, but have really come to appreciate now?
I literally applied from day one in my profession, in my professional career, and they really have borne fruit now as I run a team, whether it's running the Senior Open or my normal staff of 12 that we work on the US Open every year. We're the exclusive hospitality company for the US Open every year and have been so for the last 28 years. But I approach everything as a team orientation, as a coach. And I often say that a lot of people mistake leadership as being from up here and dictating down. That's not leadership at all. Leadership is down here, supporting and giving a foundation to those that can then blossom and fly using their skill set. That's something that I learned through basketball, not just from my coach, but also from players that I played with, players that came before me, players that I was able to influence because I was older than them. And all of those lessons are not only applicable, but they're critical in terms of, in my opinion anyway, in terms of success on a professional level.
It's interesting when you mentioned sort of leading almost from the foundation, because I worked with a business coach once that actually talked about inverting your organizational chart to put the leader, quote unquote, at the bottom, holding up the organization. And that always resonated with me. So it's neat to hear you say that. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to talk about your move to the University of Pittsburgh, and then of course, coming to Lehigh University right here in Bethlehem for your MBA. So we'll be right back. You're listening to Unscripted with Russo.
Home to the Iron Pigs in Dorney Park, Allentown is a city without limits. Food, art, dance, you name it, it's got it. Allentown's historic roots are matched with its vibrant culture to create an adventure that you'll never forget. Thinking of taking a trip? Follow Lehigh Valley, PA on Instagram, and you'll find attractions, hotels, and sites you won't want to miss.
Welcome back to Unscripted with Russo. I'm Ashley Russo, and I'm being joined by Mimi Griffin today. Mimi is the president and CEO of MSG Promotions, her promotional company that works often with golf tournaments all over the country. But we are lucky enough to have her help and expertise here in the Lehigh Valley for things like the 2014 Women's Open and the upcoming 2022 Senior Open at Saucon Valley Country Club. Mimi, it's been so great learning about your childhood growing up in Philadelphia, moving to Lancaster, and how all the women in your family played basketball and the lessons that you learned from that experience. And you said earlier that you worked hard in school. And that took you eventually to the University of Pittsburgh, where I believe you studied economics. Was that something you knew you wanted to study? Were you really good at math, or was there sort of something behind that? Because I'm not sure you would think a person in the promotional business would have studied economics.
What's funny, Ashley, is my major was economics, and I knew I always wanted business. And I knew deep down that I always wanted to have my own business. What's funny is growing up, my favorite reads were Sports Illustrated and Forbes magazine, which, you know, again, how strange is that for a teen?
Speaks though to your love of sports and business and where you were really headed eventually.
Exactly. And what's funny is back in the day, when I was in high school, there was no such thing as sports marketing. It didn't exist. And then as I was going through college, it just started. It was in its infancy. And that was in the late 70s. My father, who was a Lehigh grad, and both my brothers went to Lehigh, so it's been in the family for a while. My dad was pushing for me to get my MBA at Lehigh. Again, back in the late 70s, women didn't necessarily go on for MBA. So anyway, I ended up at Lehigh getting my MBA, but I had a couple of friends who were playing in the first women's professional league, and they were part of the New York Stars, the New York franchise. So during spring break at Lehigh, I went in to see them. They worked at Manufacturers Hanover, Manny Hanny, as we called it. And they were one of 5 companies in the country at the time that had an in-house special events department, and it included sports marketing. So I went in to see them during spring break. I had the great opportunity to meet the senior vice president of marketing while I was there, and we just hit it off. And to see a job where they worked on the New York City Marathon, the NIT, which was held in the Madison Square Garden. They had rugby tournaments all around the state of New York, basketball tournaments around the state of New York. I thought, what a dream job. So as I was graduating with my MBA from Lehigh in December of 1980, there was a woman leaving that department. So I called this gentleman, Charlie McCabe, who I just hit it off with. And I said, Charlie, would it be okay if I interviewed for that position? He said, no.
Wow.
Bummer. And then he paused and then he said, I've had you in mind all along. You have the job. So I never had to go through a formal interview process, nothing. It was like Gidget does the Big Apple. So I pack up my bags in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and I drive to New York City, and it was quite eye-opening.
You know, I don't want to brush over the fact, though, Mimi, that you picked up the phone. Well, first of all, you followed a passion and followed friends, which led to the introduction to kind of different and the right people, so to speak. You kept in contact, but then you picked up the phone and made the call. I want to pause on that for a second. I think especially for women in business and women in leadership, what's the message there? And what's the importance of that action that you took that quite frankly changed your entire trajectory?
I think because Charlie was so relatable. When I met him in his office in New York City, we sat and spoke for an hour. Now, this was a senior vice president of the fifth largest bank in the country. And I was friends with two young women that worked for him. And he had me come and sit in his office and spend an hour with me. And we just talked about everything. So I was not intimidated at all to pick up the phone because he made you feel at ease right from the beginning. However, I think the lesson, and you're right to ask this, the lesson is that you do belong. You do belong. If that's what you choose, if your skill set, if your interests, if your passion intersect at this one area, you do belong, because when you meld all of those things, you don't have any choice but to be successful, because you are marrying your interests with your passion, with your skill set. And there couldn't be a better path for you.
You know, it's interesting because I was sitting, I listened to a panel on International Women's Day with some really outstanding female leaders and many women of color back in March when that day happened here in the Lehigh Valley. And one of the women said, if you want a seat at the table, you have to ask for the seat, and sometimes you just have to take it. And I think that really resonates. And I think the more people I speak with that have found success, especially with something they're passionate about, generally they stood up, they raised their hand, or they took it and took that step forward. So you moved to New York City. There can't be too many women at this point in this field. There weren't, even in business in general in New York City, right, crossing over into the beginning of the 80s. I think it's sometimes people forget that there was a whole generation paving the way for women today. Tell me what that time was like, and what were some of the highlights, but what were some challenges that you faced?
It was eye-opening on every level. I mean, I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where they still had the Amish driving around in horse and buggy. And here I go. And I say it facetiously, but it was almost like Gidget does the Big Apple. I mean, my eyes were opened at every turn. And I lived in Westchester County. I took the train into the city. Our office was right on Park Avenue, right up from Grand Central Station. So it was magical. It was magical for most of the journey. I was standing on the floor of Madison Square Garden running a women's college basketball tournament at the age of 22, like I owned the place. It was unbelievable. We sponsored the Westchester Classic, which was a PGA Tour event. They sent me out on tour to recruit the pros. So because we weren't allowed to use any of the players' names in our promotion until they would commit to playing in that event. So Charlie, again, who was a visionary, he sent us out or me in particular, out on the tour to develop personal relationships with these players so that they would have someone, not something to relate to, but someone. So I went to the Hawaiian Open, the Los Angeles Open. I went to Doral in Florida. I had literally the dream job of all dream jobs. And my job was simply to go out, and I remember standing in the back of the Hilton on Oahu with Arnold Palmer, who's hitting golf balls into the ocean. And there wasn't anybody there but he and I. And we just struck up a conversation, and he was as nice as could be. But that was my job, is to go out and just become friends with the top players in the world. So
say what an amazing experience. And I can tell you that my early days in network TV in New York, I feel exactly the way you're talking about your early days in your career, where I just couldn't believe every day what I got to do and who I got to interact with and what I was learning. And it's just a time of my life I cherish so much, and really has built a great foundation for my career at this point. What would you say to people about some of these celebrities that you met and that you've met over the years? You know, sometimes there are different mystiques around that, especially in sports where we really hold people up on pedestals. I guess what have you learned from those experiences?
Honestly, no different than you and I. And I think you can say the same thing with your own background in TV. Everybody has a story, just like you said. Everybody wants to be seen, Ashley, whether it's common folks like me or whether it's celebrities. Everybody wants to be seen for who they are and what their contributions are. Like, for instance, Robin Roberts is one of my closest friends, and Robin has a persona and is beloved. What's wonderful about Robin is she is as authentic as she could possibly be. So what you've fallen in love with from her persona on TV is actually who she is. But, you know, not to say she doesn't have her diva moments, and just like all of us, but I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned through the years. With lots of people, whether it's what I would consider celebrities in the business world, celebrities in the television world, celebrities in the sports world, everybody is the same, and they want the ability to be seen for who they are, who they really are, and they want the ability to drop the facade so that you can see them with all their wrinkles and all their imperfections as well.
Very well said. And I think people do want to be seen. And like we like to say here in Unscripted, everyone has a story, and it's nice to give people a platform to share those. You are no exception to that. Now, I understand that you've also done some color commentary and been an analyst for some basketball. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right now, I have to tell you a funny thing here, because and mostly because you know my husband Joe, and he finds this very funny. There's another layer to the story we can discuss at another time, but I was actually the sports director for WNYU radio my junior year before I was the news director. This is quite funny because I really at the time knew nothing about sports. Joe has taught me a lot now, but I actually used to have to go with the analyst and the color commentary guys to the basketball games, mostly because I was producing and helping them set up. And he said, I don't understand how you could possibly have gotten this job. You know nothing about basketball, let alone fencing, you know, NYU's known for fencing. I said, you don't have to know to be a producer. You have to be able to organize. So I laughed when I saw that, and I thought, oh boy, these poor people that dealt with me as they were there doing the color commentary and the analyst. So tell me a little bit about that part of your career.
First, good for you for taking that job and for understanding that being a producer is a collaborator and somebody that brings all of the pieces together. So good for you for doing that. And I'll tell you a little story that started my broadcasting career. And I had no aspirations, none, never thought to go into broadcasting. And I was ESPN's primary color commentator for women's basketball for 17 years. But the way it started is I worked for Converse, the athletic shoe company, in the early 80s. And we were going to use part of our budget to produce a women's basketball game of the week. Well, they threw me in front of the camera because I was free. I had no idea what I was doing.
I can relate.
I'm sure that you can. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew basketball. And I worked with a woman, Leandra Riley, who was ESPN's first female play-by-play person when they first started. Now, this was 1980, 81, 80, 82, actually. But ESPN didn't start until 79. So they were in their infancy as well. I wasn't on ESPN. We were producing these with an independent producer out of Louisiana. He ended up being not so reputable. We produced about 6 games. They never aired anywhere. He was supposed to have syndicated them, but they never aired anywhere. But Leandra liked the job I did, and she recommended me to ESPN. So, you know, the first event I did for ESPN was a national high school cheerleading competition. I knew nothing about cheerleading, nor did I.
Oh my gosh.
And as an athlete, you can only imagine what I thought about the cheerleaders. You know, at the time, it was, you don't need to be cheering for someone, you need to be doing on your own. So anyway, so I go as the color analyst for the national high school cheerleading competition. Not a clue. There was a young guy who was the play-by-play guy. He had been a cheerleader. He knew everything he was doing. It was down in Orlando, Florida at SeaWorld. I see some of the formations coming out, and somebody that had a triple high pyramid, and the young woman was at the top standing and went from there to a split, jumped from there to a split on the ground. And my insight on that was, wow, that's gotta hurt. And that's all I had to say. And needless to say, they never invited me back. However, when they did start, and it was in 1982 that ESPN started televising women's college basketball. The first game I did was a Division II national championship game. I did one game that year. The next year, I did 2 games. And then after that, I did anywhere from a dozen to 25 games a year. And then I ended up in the studio with Robin to be the host of our studio work for the NCAA tournament. And then in between there, in 1990, I was the first woman to ever serve as a color analyst on a men's NCAA tournament game. And I'm in the Springfield Basketball Hall of Fame for that. And then I got to work for CBS for 3 years.
Mimi, it's such an amazing and illustrious career, and it has to feel pretty good at this point to look back and be able to say that you paved the way for so many females in sports and in broadcasting, and now in promotions even. I mean, for the generation today that is used to turning on basketball and football games and seeing females on the sidelines, that was not always the case. And I think it's important. No. So what does it mean to you? I mean, have you become reflective on that at all? Have you started to see and feel like you were a part of the change and the sort of increase of females in these roles?
I do. It's very gratifying. And a lot of those young women now, and not so young women, are very good friends of mine. And I am grateful for having the opportunity that I had. Something that felt like a gift to me, it's hard to feel anything but gratitude. And what's interesting is when the NCAA asked me to do that first men's game, there was a gentleman named Jim Marchioni with the NCAA and I was doing all the women's games for the NCAA and for ESPN. And he said, I need you to do me a favor. And I said, what? He goes, I want you to do a men's game. I said, why? And he said, because I want to show everybody that you can. And I'm like, okay. And then as I stood, and it was Notre Dame, Virginia, it was a Friday night primetime game, the best game of the first round. And Jim purposely put me on there and never even told ESPN that I was going to be the analyst for that game because he didn't want the media hoopla. But there I was. And I remember a guy from USA Today, back in the day, everybody lived and died on Rudy Martzke's TV column in USA Today. And I remember him coming up to me and he said, wow, this is incredible. And he looked at the charts that I had and he goes, that's a lot of work. Do you do that much work for the women's games? I said, Rudy, basketball is basketball. And he said, yeah, but this is your big break. And I said, Rudy, this is an opportunity for which I'm eternally grateful. I said, but my idea of a big break is finding a reliable babysitter. I said, if given a choice between men's and women's, I would do women's games 10 times out of 10. So it was a wonderful opportunity. And I was grateful for the chance to show that, yes, women could do it. I had no interest in it because the broadcasting was always my avocation, not my vocation. Golf was my living and the basketball was my passion. And so I was grateful for the opportunity to do both. And I had that flexibility because I had my own business.
I want to ask you a little bit about your business. So I believe you started the business in what year?
In 1980 is when I became
incorporated. And in the 90s, you developed this exclusive relationship with the USGA. Is that the right way to put it?
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about what you do with corporate hospitality sales, operations, client services for the US Open and the many US Opens that happen throughout the country year after year. What does that exactly entail? And how did you get into it? How did you figure out what needed to happen to make, because I have to say, having been a part of them very peripherally at Saucon, it's a pretty well-oiled machine. And that's a lot of work after a lot of decades. But tell me about those early years. How did you get that gig with the USGA? And then how'd you keep it?
It's because of Saucon that I got the gig, because when I was the championship director for the 92 Senior Open, and again, another position where I literally had no business being in that position, but I knew I was interested in it. And so I just worked like crazy to stay one step ahead of everybody else. But when my husband and I moved to the Lehigh Valley, Saucon knew of my experience working on the manufacturer's Hanover Westchester Classic, the PGA Tour event. Billy and I had applied for membership, and they knew about my background. So they expedited our membership, and then they asked me, well, do you want to just do the corporate sales for this? And I said, no, I want to run it all. Well, I'd never done that. And I just thought, the heck with it, I want to run it all. So I just educated myself. And honestly, ignorance is bliss sometimes. You work like crazy. And I had no idea whether what I was doing was right or wrong. I just knew I kept moving forward, and I kept moving forward, and I got everybody excited about it. And our 92 Senior Open was the most successful by 3 times than any other Senior Open. And a lot of factors had played into that, and certainly not just my hard work. The Lehigh Valley was the perfect market for this because there was no minor league baseball, there was no minor league hockey. We were the only game in town, and nothing like this of this magnitude had ever been in the Lehigh Valley. So anyway, after that, David Fay, who was the executive director of the USJ, called me to his office in Far Hills, and he said, how did you do that in the little Lehigh Valley? And I said, what you don't understand is the little Lehigh Valley, which wasn't so little, is the perfect place for the Senior Open. And so he said, would you like to sell corporate hospitality for the US Open? I'm like, sure, but why not? So I started in 93 to sell the 95 US Open, and it was just me. Again, didn't know much of what I was doing, just educated myself, ended up selling about $8 million in hospitality that year at Shinnecock Hills. And then just continued to grow. In 98, I took on 2 additional staff members. And then in 2001, took on about 5 staff members. And we pretty much learn by doing. But
I love that it's another example of another time. You picked up that phone and called Charlie, and you picked up the phone, or you said it's Saucon, no, I want more than that. And I want to just continue to point that out, Mimi, because I think we really try to emphasize. I know you do a lot of speaking and mentoring, as do I, and it's just so important for people to raise their hand and to take that risk. And you certainly exemplify the necessity is the mother of invention, but also that luck is the residue of hard work, which is my mother-in-law's favorite thing, or the harder you work, the luckier you get. And this is another way to say it. But I love that. Well, we want to take a quick break, but when we come back, you will want to hear all about Mimi's love of the Lehigh Valley, Saucon Valley Country Club, and what's coming up this summer of 2022. So stay tuned. You're listening to Unscripted with Russo.
Time to take your workout outdoors. Discover Lehigh Valley is a great resource for finding easily accessible nature trails with stunning views and challenging terrain. Whether you're exploring the Delaware and Lehigh Trail or going for a jog on the Ironton Rail Trail, explore Discover Lehigh Valley to get you started. Follow them on Instagram, Lehigh Valley PA.
Welcome back to Unscripted with Russo. If you're just joining us, you're going to want to rewind and listen to Mimi Griffin, because she's talked so much about her incredible, inspiring career. But now we're kind of to present day, Mimi, and we want to ask you a little bit about the Lehigh Valley, having grown up in Philadelphia and Lancaster, going to Lehigh for your MBA, and then coming back to this region. Tell me a little bit about why you came back after having spent time in Westchester, New York, and why the Lehigh Valley was home, and this area has been home for you.
Honestly, I like to say that the Lehigh Valley is just a tremendous place to live, work, and play. It provides everything you need for a well-balanced life. Forget professional life or personal life, just a well-balanced life. It reminds me a lot of Lancaster, where I grew up. The convenience of it, being close to New York, close to Philadelphia, yet the small town feel and vibe. It's a perfect market for various things, whether it's business locations or whether it's events. One of the highlights is the fact that we now have minor league baseball and minor league hockey. And that's because this market is perfect for those types of events. And we've got another big event coming this summer, the 2022 US Senior Open. It'll be the 3rd time that championship will be hosted by Saucon Valley Country Club.
And it's very exciting because, of course, I moved here in 2004 and we joined Saucon Valley in 2005. My husband is a very avid golfer. He's on men's golf chair now and on the recently elected to the board. So very passionate about all things Saucon. And we were here for the Women's Open. There was the Mid-Am, but the buzz around the Senior Open that's coming up is so exciting for the Lehigh Valley. For people who maybe aren't golf enthusiasts, can you explain why a golf tournament coming to our region is important, but also why they might want to come out and see it? Because I went to golf tournaments. I went to the Byron Nelson when Joe and I were dating because I worked with someone who lived down there and they invited us. And I have to say, going to a tournament is so incredible and so exciting. And you can't quite explain it until you experience it. So tell people a little bit about what they can expect.
Well, a couple of things. One, for the golf enthusiasts, there is no better place to be. So we will naturally get those that are very interested in golf. But one of the things that we're trying to do, especially with this championship, is appeal to those that either have a casual interest or even no interest in golf. First of all, Saucon Valley Country Club has to be one of the prettiest, most pristine pieces of real estate I've ever seen. And I go to all the great clubs, all the great cities in this country with the US Open, and I've never seen anything that compares to Saucon. So just to come out to walk the grounds here is a treat. That's number one. But number two, we're going to have lots of activities here, like our 19th hole, which is an area that's never been done at any USGA event, not the US Open, Women's Open, or Senior Open. In the middle of our 3 finishing holes, we have a 660,000 square foot piece of real estate. And that used to be where we had our corporate hospitality, but now we're turning it into an outdoor festival-like area where we're going to have a 9,000 square foot putting green where folks can test their skills on the same conditions that the players will be playing on. We're going to have golf simulators. Wind Creek is going to provide social gaming so people can bet in real time on the action that's happening on 16, 17, and 18, but not for money, for free. And then they accrue points that can be redeemed for merchandise. We've got folks like St. Luke's that's providing all of our health care, as well as a health and wellness pavilion. We have Lehigh Valley Health Network that is the presenting sponsor of the 19th hole and our junior experience. We've got Wind Creek, which I mentioned, Yingling, which is a 193-year-old company. We have iconic companies and organizations within not only the Lehigh Valley, but central Pennsylvania, who are really coming out in force to help make this event something that not only benefits the community, but also will appeal to all angles and all levels in the community. And so we appeal to everyone to take a look, because I think there's going to be something going on that will interest everybody and everyone of all age.
Well, it certainly sounds unbelievable. And it sounds like you've had the opportunity to play with and experiment with some ideas that maybe you've had for a while, but Saucon Valley was maybe the place for you to try those out. Is that right?
Thankfully, the USGA embraced our ideas, and not only embraced it, but fully supported everything. One of the things I forgot to mention is we're going to have concerts on late afternoon, Tuesday and Wednesday during the practice rounds. The Craig Thatcher Band will be entertaining all those.
Craig is a past guest, and he's wonderful and a good friend to us here and to the Lehigh Valley. Such a talent.
Unbelievable. I know. And we are so grateful to CF Martin Guitars. And I've come to learn that there's a bunch of senior tour players who actually play Martin guitars. So we're going to try to entice them to come out and have a jam session on the stage with Craig.
Such a cool concept of taking all of the big leaders, corporate, nonprofit in the Valley, and putting them together through this one common event. I mean, it's really neat. And I hope people get excited. If they want to learn more, where can they go for more information, Mimi?
It's the Senior Open website, and that's www.ussenioropen.com. That will give you all sorts of information about the Senior Open, but also can give you a link to purchasing tickets. And the tickets are very reasonable, whether it's a daily ticket that starts at $25 or a weekly ticket, which is $165 for all 6 days. It's really affordable, and kids 18 and under get in free. So it will absolutely be a family event.
Oh, that's great. I don't know that I knew that. My daughter's not quite 18 yet. Perfect. Before I let you go, for people who are coming into town for something like the Senior Open, tell us about some of your favorite things in the Lehigh Valley. I know that for me, the culinary scene has changed so dramatically. Are there a couple places you like to go and eat, or things you like to see when you're here? We have such a great historical area. We have such great arts. They might come to town and maybe they want to do something else. So what are Mimi's favorite things to do here?
Well, Arts Quest is anybody who loves the arts, and Cassie Hilbert has done an unbelievable job with Arts Quest, and we're trying to get them involved with the Senior Open as well. But I like outdoorsy things like the Lehigh Parkway. unbelievable system of parks. I like to go tubing down the Delaware, go in Easton and go tubing. The culinary scene, Apollo, Edge, lots of great restaurants in the Lehigh Valley to avail yourself of. But as I mentioned earlier, it's a place that has something for everyone. And it's close enough, but far enough away from the major metropolitan areas to give you a sense of calm and serenity, but still all of the attributes and amenities that you'd want from a big city area.
Well, Mimi, it's so wonderful to talk to you, to get to know you a little bit better. And, just so many accolades over the years. Best 50 women in business in Pennsylvania at one point. I know Sports Business Journal, Game Changer, you were named Women in Sports Business. And I think something I heard about you that I feel as a mom is really special is that you actually stepped down from your duties at ESPN back in 2000, I think, to coach your son's CYO basketball team at St. Thomas More. My kids went to St. Michael's, so we know St. Tommy really well, graduates from Central Catholic. So I can't tell you how much that means as a working mom to hear that you prioritize things like that for your children.
Well, thank you, Ashley. And I have to tell you, coaching Kyle's team was one of the greatest things I've ever done in my life. It was the best.
That's awesome. All right. Before I let you go, we do a little thing called rapid fire here. I just want to confirm for the audience that you have not heard these questions.
No, I have not.
All right. Are you ready?
Yes.
All right. What is your favorite hobby or secret talent? Now, secret, it can't be something you told us about already.
I have a good talent at making people feel good about themselves.
Wonderful. That's a great one. All right. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Stay in the moment.
Oof. I needed to hear that one. What actress would you cast to play you in a movie about your life?
Jodie Foster.
Awesome. If you didn't have the job you have now, and it can't be something you've previously done, what would you be doing instead?
I would be a college coach of women's basketball.
Never say never.
And I'd have several national championships by now.
For sure, no doubt. All right, name one person who inspires you.
Oh, I could name a whole bunch of people. I would say my sister Barb.
Wonderful. Well, Mimi Griffin, it has been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much. And it's inspiring to see MSG Promotions hear all about your career. We are super excited here at Unscripted and at ASR Media for the U.S. Senior Open, which is coming to Saucon Valley Country Club this June. We want people to get their tickets, come out. I promise you will have a great time. Mimi, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity to visit with you.